Yeah, I'm Jay Mellisher, Head of Data Analytics here at Calibra. Welcome, everyone. We're really excited to get started with this. Next slide, please. So our webinar today is about decentralization and democratization. And here's how Calibra comes in to facilitate it. The complexity that customers are facing today are going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to see new tools and infrastructure and users, et cetera. And that's okay because Calibra can help customers get united by data across all of these systems, processes, tools, right? Calibra is designed to be a single system of engagement for data across the modern enterprise. So regardless of where an organization's data is stored and what ELT or ELT, ETL tools, analytics tools that you're using, Calibra can help. Next slide, please. All right, so to get some real life perspective on all of this, I'm joined by Ryan Galloway, Senior VP of Enterprise Data Management Services at Moody's. His focus is ensuring Moody's delivers the best-in-class data management tools for use across the company, including Calibra. Previously, Ryan worked for Bank of America, running transformation projects in the data space, eventually becoming product owner of Calibra, and he became a Calibra Ranger in 2020. The efforts of Moody's team is ahead of the curve. They really embraced data democratization, even before there was a term data mesh. Moody's created a decentralized model that today is a standout in the industry. Ryan's going to tell you all about the why, the how, and the results. And then after that, the two of us are going to sit down for a deeper dive into the data journey. So with that, Ryan, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay. And thanks everybody for joining today. So like Jay said, I want to tell you a little bit about our data governance journey here at Moody's and really kind of what we've experienced along the way in an effort to kind of help you guys as well. We're all in this together, and that's something Jay and I will get into a little bit later as well. So really for me, it began at Moody's in 2019. So late 2019, I got to join Moody's, and there were really a few key decisions we made early. And so one of the first things was we were going to embrace democratization and decentralize data across the company. We were looking at kind of a larger data governance organization that previously existed. So we wanted to kind of break that up and to the second point here, drive the data ownership down to the business owners and the lines of business to really own the data. And then along the way, we wanted to make sure that we streamline and simplify one set of tools that can be leveraged across the enterprise so we all spoke the same language and could leverage the same tools holistically. So really that's where we started. We kind of embraced a theory as we went here though, is as a central function, as a central data governance function, we don't know the data as well as the people who work with it and own it every day. So the spirit of this quote that we've kind of taken in our organizations, let the people do their job. They know the data best. They know how it should be used. They know who should use it. So let's pass that back to them. In 2019 when we got here, we spent a lot of time looking at kind of the data governance organization that was established. There were lots of spreadsheets of data lineage, data terms, elements, all kinds of stuff like that. And as many of you know, across your journeys, it's very difficult to keep that up to date. And it goes stale very, very quickly. So hand-collected lineages can change very quickly, and we want to get out of that model. And sometimes we would find that it wasn't meaningful anymore because it was so stale. So we had to figure out a way to automate some of this and create good processes for the small things that are meaningful. Let's capture them, let's update them frequently, and then figure out how to kind of come up with a set of priorities to deliver on those. So in that mindset, knowing that we came from a very centralized data governance organization, decentralization was actually a model that was very embraced around here. We didn't have to push it. We didn't have to sell it a whole lot. People wanted to manage their data more closely. And they wanted a central function that kind of helped them and facilitated, but didn't own it so much. So we really found that foundation and that model to be successful here. And right now, if you're in data, you're thinking about mesh concepts, you're thinking about decentralization. And I think, we got lucky with how we kind of walked into it, thinking about a domain structure in some ways. But I think that's really helped us go quickly into a more mesh concept as we mature and keep growing. So, when we kind of started, we were looking at it, we were saying, hey, there is a need for that single platform, a single way for people to visualize and understand data across the firm. And let's come up with some similar nomenclature. When we talk about business terms or business elements or critical data elements, those kind of things, what do we mean? Because lines of businesses were kind of using some different nomenclature. So, we were trying to push people to a kind of common set of terms, for lack of a better word, about how we refer to data. So we really started working on that. We really started kind of thinking about that domain model as well, and pushing that down to people. And we found the data owners to kind of take responsibility for their space. And they've really embraced it. And I think they've tried to figure out, okay, how do we make our data more meaningful, and how do we kind of publish it and be champions of our data in their business as well? So I think as we started going out, we were talking to people and saying, hey, what are your challenges? And a lot of them were, we don't want to collect metadata just because we're told to, right? How do we enable business functions through that? And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go as well. So moving on, there's really 3 reasons we started working with Calibra. Jay mentioned in a previous life, I had some experience with Calibra as well, but we really started, there were about 5 data governance tools in Moody's at the time. And again, I think I've hit on this a couple of times. I think when you have 5 different tools that tell you the kind of same thing, it's very difficult to, across lines of businesses, make sure that we message that and that we're talking the same language and that we can share and understand each other's data well. So we were looking for something that was user-friendly, something that didn't only appeal to tech, didn't only appeal to developers, didn't always just look like kind of the SQL server kind of database oriented look. We wanted something that was a little bit more user-friendly and customizable. We're also looking for that single tool, like we talked about. Don't need 5 tools to do one thing. How can we use one tool? And then the flexibility. I think that plays in the user interface as well. It's like, how do we actually make this business oriented instead of just being data governance for data governance sake or tech for tech's sake? So really, we started looking at these. We started partnering with Calibra to figure out how we start moving forward. But I think it's good from here to walk into a couple examples of why and how we've kind of increased adoption at Moody's. We're at the point now where about 20% of Moody's is using Calibra, and it's open to everyone at Moody's to be able to use. But it's been very effective for us in a short amount of time. So let's talk about use case 1 for a minute. One big thing we want to focus on is, like I said, making it simple for any user, making the user interface a little bit easier for a business person to use, ask questions about the data and try to get responses. So the first use case, I think it's really meaningful that one of our largest first users, the people who kind of started gathering this data governance data, they didn't have a background in data governance. Some of our partners, they were, think about like analysts or research writers. They were writing, content for some of our products, and they were actually asked to kind of shift gears a little bit and start defining terms, capturing some of these data governance activities, start connecting terms with API codes and kind of front-end UI elements. And they excelled at it. They did wonderfully at it, and it was very impressive to watch. And it really told me that, hey, you don't need a team of 100 data governance experts to do this work. We can all do this ourselves if we kind of provide a central COE type function to enable folks, and then just push it down to them with a little bit of help. And I think that really buys in too with some of this, hey, we want to make it that business user friendly. We want to make it less jargony. We don't always have to use data governance and data management jargon. We can make it that business friendly view. So right now we have about 40 lines of businesses that are using it in some way, shape, or form. And this, that's really meaningful to me that, like I said, 20% of our company is using this on a regular cadence and getting data out of it. And that's because we've kind of designed these small little microservice type architectures within it to deliver on specific use cases for people. So if you want to know a little bit about the applications we have versus if you want to know what kind of data we're purchasing from external companies, they're in little kind of pockets where you can kind of access and take a look at that. So moving on to the second example, it's really about delivering business value. And this is something we are really passionate about. Much less a stick approach to data governance and much more of the carrot. So how can we help you solve our business problems? So really, we were able to work with one of our teams, and they really started delivering for our sales and customer team. which I thought was extremely impactful. I'm so used to thinking data governance is something you should do and that you need to do, but this really helped me take a step back with those partners and say, okay, how do we use data governance to enable that business process? So, you can look at the quote on the slide here. Want to convey that Moody's Calibra really does make a huge difference for us. Just had a use case that was so simple to answer thanks to Calibra and would have been an absolute nightmare a few years ago. So absolutely chuffed at how much simpler it was today. And we've all kind of joked a little bit about this slide because the first time I saw this email, I had to look up chuffed to make sure I understood what it meant. So this is one of our international users, and it does mean that they were very excited about the use of this. But it took something that was tough for a sales or customer service representative to find the definition of a column or a business term or a piece of data or an API code and say, okay, what does this really mean? What's the difference in these two columns? And how can I tell my customer, hey, this is actually what that means? So instead of having to go back to developers, instead of having to go back to product owners internally, they were able to basically search within the Calibra interface, pull down that definition and take a look at it. We've also got examples where we're able to extract that metadata as well on some of our products and deliver it to customers as extracts as well. So it's been really meaningful to try to start delivering on some of those business use cases as well. The third use case I wanted to outline that's been really impactful for us is something called the External Reference Data Marketplace. And so what we tried to do here, and this is actually one of the first use cases we implemented, is Moody's is a data company in its core. And we actually consume a lot of data as well to be able to think through and produce our opinions and products as well. So when we think about the existing data products and the contracts that we have, we needed a place for our users to be able to view them and see them kind of across the business. And really understand what data we have. How can it be used? How can it be leveraged? How can it be transformed or passed along? Or maybe it can't be. But until you start defining that and making it searchable and understandable, it's really a challenge, and there's definitely opportunity for improvement along the way. So we were able to leverage Calibra as kind of an interface to make this marketplace available. So a user can come in, query, hey, do we have data on commercial real estate? Hey, do we have data on some other piece of information, and see what contracts we might have in place, and then understand if they could use that data for their use case. So this had a pretty sweeping impact, and this is where we've seen a lot of excitement as well. It really kind of catalogs those products and vendors that we get data from and make sure we define the usage. So just talking about kind of some of the lessons learned as we went through this, the first thing that I think we called out, especially in use case one, is simplifying, and not only just the language that we talked about in use case, making it less jargony, making it user friendly, but also you don't need this massive central data governance organization. You need kind of a model that helps enable others. And through that decentralization, you pass it back down to the line of business to let them be true owners and managers of that data. The second one that we tried to embrace was that business first lens. So instead of being tech for tech or data governance for data governance sake, how do we help enable the business by doing this work? And so, yes, there's a lot of baseline data governance work you have to do. You have to go and do the hard work of connecting your business terms to physical data elements and things like that to really produce the extreme value as an outcome. But how do we sell it as, hey, this is an opportunity for you to really solve a business problem for yourself? Doing something like taking activity from months to minutes because you've made your data more queryable or more searchable. And then the last thing is really make sure we're people first. And it kind of comes back to business first as well. But we know the people within those businesses are really the experts around their data. So we need to let them drive it. And we can, we're able to customize things based on lines of businesses, based on the people that use it, to make sure that we deliver for their specific use cases as well. So that's just a little bit about our journey. I know we've got some time set up to spend with Jay and talk through some questions, and I know we'll take some questions from the audience too. But Jay, what do you have on your mind?
All right. What do I have? There's a lot on my mind. So I love that you've established decentralization and democratization as a sort of a first principle years ago. And as you began this journey, and everybody's got data mesh on their minds now, and this is a pretty hot topic. Again, decentralization. Let the experts do what they're good at. I love that phrase. So, and you saw that early. Let's go back to sort of the before days. So what led you to kind of piece that together, right? How did you get, and then, from there, how'd you get ahead of the curve, from that point on?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we did, first off, Jay, is start engaging with business partners when we first came in and really start talking to people. And, I think so many times we start with, hey, I've got this solution. Hey, we need to, you need to do this. And I think, my organization took an approach of let's listen first, see what was working, what wasn't working. And really, I think one of the big changes is really understanding that our businesses were operating in that domain format kind of already. They might have called them something different, but they were already operating in some of those domain type, functions. So it really helped us say, okay, great. Then let's just embrace that and let's go with it. If this is how you see your business, data governance doesn't need to come in and say, well, I'm defining your business this way. No. You define your business and you tell us kind of what the scope is of it and then let you kind of drive forward from there. But the goal was, hey, let's make it easy to use. Let's make it feel like part of your routine, part of your existing business. We don't want to create some fake hierarchy for you. We want you to use the hierarchy that you feel is right. So I think that really helped us take a step forward and kind of skip that. Of course, we had to go through a definition of domain phase, but people already had a concept of where their boundaries were because that's how they were operating day to day. And we just kind of embraced that and went through it. So also on talking to people, we want to stop doing data governance for data governance sake. We know we need it. We want it. We think this can help us, but can we, distill it down a little bit to the things that are critically important and start there? And it's been really fun to see people start at that level with the baseline kind of stuff and say, you know what, if I just did this one more thing, what piece of business value can I get out of it? And I think that's where we've got a lot of fun interaction with our lines of businesses as well.
So rather than you pushing, they're pulling on the need, and it's value driven.
Yeah.
That's what they need to do. That's really cool. So all of that sounds great as a starting point. Now, and you said that you didn't really have to convince the business folks to want to do this. They clearly wanted to do this, right? There was already an embrace. And I think you said you acted as a COE to help enable them to get going. Now, did this be, maybe in the beginning, was this a data literacy or a skills challenge in the beginning within the business, right? Did you wind up having to hire, let's say, governance professionals in the business, or did you just teach data to business people? How did that part of it work?
Yeah, I don't think, I won't give our team credit for teaching people data or data governance for sure, but I think Moody's being a data company, and we talked about that in the beginning, and the core of what we produce is data, is opinions. It's not widgets coming out of a factory most of the time. It is data. So I think there was a lot of data literacy that already existed. People understand data at its core. I think our job was to kind of come in and start making sure that we push people to speak the same way, talk the same language, do some of the same things, use those same central tool sets. So you didn't see a massive hiring of data governance organization or anything like that. And we do act as, somewhat of a COE. We got small teams at the center that our job is to go and kind of enable and facilitate that activity across the lines of businesses. And we have great data partners in our lines of businesses that are champions for us. And every time they go and talk about us, it gets people more excited. And, that's not something that's frequently said, is people getting excited about data governance. But I think if you help them solve business problems, it's kind of a natural reaction, right? Anytime you can help somebody solve their problems along the way.
Very cool. If it's okay with you, I kind of want to bring in an audience question that's really related to this current thread. So Moody's is a data company. You didn't have to teach people how to speak data. They already spoke data, right? high data literacy, but there are some, let's say, additional responsibilities, and you touched on a few of those during your presentation, I think. You know, did you find that you needed to justify maybe additional time to invest in them for them to have to manage data, right? Maybe it's, I don't know if it's infrastructure but were there explicit investments that were needed?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. It's something you always, especially when you're starting your data governance journey, it's like, okay, well, if I ask these people to do this, they have a day job as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I can't just throw an additional responsibility on them. That's a real challenge. But I think what we found in our organization, and I feel very lucky and blessed because of it, we had people that were doing these activities already within the lines of businesses individually. Now, finding those people were sometimes a challenge because we didn't have a central place to declare, clear owners like a domain catalog or something like that. We had pockets of them. And so once you find these people, and we continue to find people that are doing it as part of their job on this journey, but we found the people that were doing it already and just kind of brought them into the fold, really, through data governance councils, through these kind of relationship type councils, and making sure that we have those COEs that are talking to them. So, it was less about saying, hey, we need you to start spending 25% of your capacity doing data governance. A lot of times it was finding the people that were already doing this and pulling them in. Now, there are some certain scenarios where, maybe we need to ramp up that team a little bit. And I think that's something that you have to have the open and honest dialogue with along the way. And it's going to happen and we're going to run into it. But I think we were lucky enough where those people existed. It just may have not been very formalized and everybody didn't know who it was that was doing that activity day to day.
That's good. Well, give yourself some more credit than that. I don't know that it's just luck. I think that every organization probably has, let's say, business people that are just invested personally, let's say, in wanting to really maximize their value that they can get from data. They just need help. Right. And I think, give yourself some credit, I think, for finding them, enabling them, helping them. And I like the term, bring them into the fold, right? Because then they're all part of this virtual team, right? Helping that whole thing to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right, I'm going to shift gears for a second. As complicated as the regulatory world is, right? You're all about simplification. You're about, the user, the business user, and really delivering, right, for the customer and increasing business value. So was there a moment when you kind of knew that you achieved that at Moody's? Was there like some moment where it just became super obvious and there was a celebration or tell us how this is.
There was a big glowing light and everything just happened. No, it's a really good question. And I do think of the regulatory needs that I've seen in my life as a baseline, right? And I think you have to shift from, okay, you got to do this because it is the baseline. It's absolutely what's required to do. And then kind of turn it on its side and say, now how do I drive value out of the activity that we were required to do? So I think that's the opportunity. And really where we saw a shift, I would say, is when people started coming to us, asking us to help them solve some of these business problems. And some of them maybe looked at it and said, oh, okay, I'm already doing some of these activities. If I brought in, what other value propositions could I get? So people really started coming to us and asking us about, how do you manage this? How would you help us solve this problem? Is there an opportunity here? And I think that's when we really started feeling a shift, is when our plate starts filling up because people are starting to ask us, hey, is there a way we can do this? Can I start looking at my controls inside Calibra as part of my elements? Can I do, lineage in a more effective or efficient way? Is there a way to automate this activity that I'm doing manually today from a data governance perspective? So I think that push versus pull, which you mentioned earlier too, I think that was really helpful for us.
That's amazing. So maybe I think I know the answer to this next question. This is really bottom-up driven thinking rather than top-down push, right? From an organizational standpoint, are business leaders able to speak data and ask data-related questions, right? That kind of in the background wind up demanding good governance in the background? Or is it really the other way around? Like, where, where is this
Yeah.
written from? I think I might know the answer, but tell me what.
I think it's a little bit of both for sure. And I would say that, we talked about Moody's is a data company. We're extremely data literate as a function and as a company. So I think it's definitely our senior leaders know how to speak data. They know, they understand it. They understand how we're split as a company. And so we've gotten a lot of support from the top for sure. But I think what the other piece of this is fun is because a lot of that push versus pull that we talked about, the people who are pushing us to new use cases tended to be the bottom up approach. So they're getting kind of, that guidance from up on high that says, hey, we need to be doing these activities. We need to make sure that we have a, sustainable and strong governance environment. But at the same time, some of those activities and those questions are being pushed up from the bottom, which help us go even faster in some cases. So I think, maybe different motivations between the two, for why we were embracing it. But I think, we get there between the two and it makes it really successful for us.
It's great. I'm gonna, if it's okay with you again, there's another audience question that I wanted
Let's go for it.
to kind of include in this theme. So, taking some of this a little like sort of a step further, right? You've got top-down support for the need for this, and you've got bottom-up or grassroots or organizationally, people want to get value from data, so they're joining forces with you, right? They're now in the fold. So there's a question here from Tino. So how has Moody's assigned data ownership? Are you assigning by a data domain, by a data source? Are you formalizing with a data product notion? And then can you give an example of a line of business and their own data? Maybe with examples, does that help? So how formalizing have you gotten really with the structure of these things? Maybe is the theme of that question.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. So let me try my best, and then we can, Jay, you push back on me and tell me, you want more detail. So when we think about data ownership, it really started for us in a way of how do we think about data being consumed? Like, what kind of data do we have as a line of business? So, we think about things we get from the outside. We think about things that we have from the inside, and then we think about things that are kind of being created inside our walls as well. So we think about data in those three ways, but really when we think about ownership, we try to tie back to that domain structure. So we do have domain stewards and domain execs in our lines of businesses that are broken up. But if you think about a domain, typically they do have some set of physical data sources aligned to them, and there are the concept of applications. There are application owners too that kind of roll into that domain architecture in some way. And so I think that's even where you kind of get to a little bit of that mesh orientation at some point is it's not so much about the source of the data. It's about kind of the concept of a whole, that logical concept or building of a domain. And there may be multiple sources that provide that. There may be one source there, it's a little bit different for each line of business in our area. So it's really a construct of we do have somebody that feels that they're the business owner of it. We also have somebody that feels like they're the tech owner in something like an application manager or a tech exec for that area.
Great. All right. I love that. So I'm hearing you say that really your answer to the question is yes, you have structure. You think about the purpose for a given data set more than you think about source. Is this a source data set or otherwise?
What kind of data are you housing, right? That's the focus. Yeah. Instead of giving that formal architecture the most value, we've given the type and category of data kind of the most value.
Right. I think the thrust of the question is ownership, and you're definitely structuring around that to make sure that there's and not only is there an owner of the data, but you've got several different types of ownership roles within the notion of the larger pieces of the puzzle for a given data set or data product. Yeah.
I think the other interesting part of that question that intrigued me was they referred to the by data product. And that's as we move towards kind of mesh, that's something that comes out a lot, and we definitely have started thinking about how do we how do we talk about data products and what do they mean in our line of business and what do they mean at Moody's in general? Is a product something you sell? Is a product something you consume internally? Like, how do we define that? So there's definitely work to be done there. But in general, we think of domains owning data sets that they publish out. And I think we think of data sets right now, kind of from a Calibra technical standpoint, we think of data sets much as products that are consumed internally. We haven't made that full shift to say, okay, how do I define a data product internally separately than I define a data product that's sold externally? So definitely still work to do there as well.
Yeah, definitely work, but you've been doing, you've had data products commercially available for quite a long time. So it's not foreign to you. And
That's right.
hopefully I would imagine that's helping to serve really as an analogy or a starting point for people that are thinking about what it takes to have an internal sort of enterprise data product. So I imagine that's helpful.
It is. It is.
All right. All right. So let's go to here's another question that I have for you. Well, so my team is essentially a customer of our own product as well, right? Internally within Calibra. And as a part of that work, we're very lucky to be able to work closely with our product org and give sort of an internal voice of the customer. Now, you have been working with Calibra as a customer for years. How have you approached that relationship? Kind of working with our team in making that partnership work. Where's that helping each other along the way?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You and I actually, caught up a little bit about this. So I love to hear your opinion on this too. As you do turn into more of a customer of the tool, how do you do it as well, right? And you always think, oh, it's probably very easy for you because you sit right next to the guys, but that's not the reality. I know, so you have to give feedback the same way I do in some cases. But I've been working with, Calibra for a while now, and each of the tools that we own, we keep really close partnerships with those people, and those partnerships grow over time through trust and building of relationships. So I think that's really important. But Calibra itself has grown tremendously over the 7 years that I've been, partnering and working with them. And I think one thing that maintains is you guys still listen to feedback, and whether that be through the ideation portal, whether through events that you hold and take feedback, or even folks from your product team may be engaging with customers. I think they're willing and able to listen to feedback, and we've actually been able to provide a few examples where we've been able to deliver some changes with the product team as well. But definitely account managers and CSM, customer success managers that we've worked with have been super helpful in helping us find the right person, because transparently, they're not always the right person to give your feedback to, and they've always been helpful in making sure that we find the right route to get that feedback heard. But just a couple examples of where we've done that is in early Calibra days, there's a function within Calibra, and this is going to get very quick, so I apologize. We're going to move out of business for a second, but there's a migration feature in Calibra that didn't exist in the early days, and they actually Calibra responded to feedback that it was hard for us to manage multiple environments without something like the migration tool because of competing UUIDs. And so they actually came up with something back then. I think it was called Cargo, that turned into migration and a production feature. And I feel like that's somewhere where we had to work really closely to say, okay, how do we solve for something like this to make us more sustainable and grow over time? And then even more recently, JL's team has been great about working with us on some activities for AWS and creating some interactions between S3s and Lambdas and DynamoDB, and how we maybe automate some custom lineage opportunities that we can send through the technical or Calibra lineage to be able to connect to our catalog. Nice. So, if you think about today, what most users see when they see Calibra lineage is they're going to see a database-oriented connection string, schema, table, column type view, and that's the only things you can connect. And I think where they've been able to respond to feedback very quickly on the product side is saying, hey, we kind of came to them and said, hey, how we think this thing could help everyone. if you expand it to start thinking not about schema table column, but also start thinking about, report fields from Tableau and different S3 buckets, instead of that schema table column, how do we think about file and field, that's more Parquet oriented? So I think, blowing it up too sometimes and realizing that you're maybe not the only customer, and how would this activity help everyone else too? I think Calibra is very responsive to that approach as well. So, something like that's going to be able to turn into a win for not only our AWS and S3 interaction at Moody's, but probably for users of Azure and GCP and Tableau and others in the future as well.
Yeah, there's so much to do with unstructured data. Absolutely. And well, thanks for the ideas.
No, it's fun. Like, we're users of the product, right? And so we want to continue pushing to make it the best it can be. And so, that's the other great thing about having a community is, hey, there are other great ideas out there. And even in the ideation portal, I snoop around in there sometimes and see what people are talking about. Or when I think about something, hey, has that already been put in there? And, you can upvote it and vote for it along the way. Jay, you do some of that too, don't you?
Absolutely. Our team, sorry, I jumped on that one. So Calibra has been running some more formal beta programs with the customer population, and our team gets to participate in those, and we're sort of all over them. We get to run through the guided beta, let's say, scenarios that are provided and give feedback and maybe file a bug, maybe file another enhancement request, et cetera. The beta program is just a great way to engage with where the platform's going and to give some opinions on that. So we very much enjoy that. All right, so thanks, Ryan. I have one more, let's say, big picture question, and then we'll pivot to some more audience questions. There's a whole bunch of them. Thank you, everybody. So this will be a simple question to ask. Let's see what your answer is.
All right.
What does done look like for data governance? Tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a challenging question, and something, frankly, when you're in the data space for a while, your leaders are going to ask you too, is, okay,
Right.
Think about it as a project, right? Is it done? When is it delivered? When is data governance delivered? And I think there's a reshaping that we have to do along the way, and some leaders really quickly accept that and really get it. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of explaining and kind of encouragement to why this is never done. But in my opinion, data governance isn't a completed activity ever. You're never done. There's always new data being added to the platform. And I strongly feel that there's always going to be a need to be able to activate, provide some of that guidance, have people doing some of that. And even, I think there's going to be a lot of automation coming in the future, but I think there are still places where you're going to need people to do this activity, and it's never just done. You're always going to have new data. You're always going to have changing definitions. You're always going to have new products that are being produced. So let's leverage some automation, but at the same time, we got to keep working on this, and it can continue to mature over time as well. So I think the short answer is I don't feel like data governance is ever done. You're never completed with that project. It's more of a function that's going to exist ongoing.
I like the way you said that. Yeah, it's a function, right? Yep, exactly. Cool. All right, so let's go to some audience questions. I've got a whole bunch of them queued up here, and again, thank you, everybody. And we're going to continue on this data governance, on this data governance theme. So you had mentioned a term earlier a few times called councils or data governance councils.
Okay.
Have you created other kinds of councils at Moody's to help with the governance journey, right? Maybe especially relating to sort of the adoption of this platform or use cases or processes, right? That you just said data governance is becoming a function, not a project, right? So tell us more about the council approach that you've been taking.
Yeah, really, we've taken kind of, I'll say, two council approaches. Of course, we have different interactions across every line of business, but we really key on, there's an executive forum where we talk about the big picture, meaningful things, and then how we tie data governance in. So it's a data governance council with very senior executives who are in attendance to that, and in attendance is the wrong word. They participate very actively in it as well. And so I think they're trying to tie back how our data governance journey and how the large scale roadmaps plug in together. So we definitely have that one. And I would say we have a more operational level group as well. And I think that's a lot of times where we try to, rubber meets the road a little bit more. And what we've done with one of my peers is we've made it a little bit more conversational. Instead of data governance talking at you, we've been able to pull in some of our users and some of the people who are doing some really cool things, with our help and configuration along the way, but they get to tell the story for us sometimes. And so I think that's kind of a fun shift. Instead of, you're being in this maybe old dry council where the data governance team is talking to you about all these things you need to do. How are the users telling a story about, oh man, I'm trying this really cool thing and it's going to help me solve a business problem? Or, hey, we were able to use Lineage to solve this problem of communicating change more broadly across the organization. And I think that's been a win for us is, how do we stop talking at them so much and let them tell the story for us? And there is a little bit of irony there too, is Jay, I'm the one, talking to you about this today. But, I think you probably embrace a similar thing is like, how do we drive others to tell the story for us because they're users? You are the user of the product. So.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I love that conversational approach that you've described. One of the things that we've begun to do internally is to give those folks in the business who have had a success story or made material progress on some governance related initiative or data related initiative for that matter. We give them a platform internally to sort of show off. Right? Share their success, why it was meaningful and valuable to them in their area, and how others can take advantage of it as well. So, definitely sharing that stage, it just encourages more of that pull as you were describing earlier. So I think we do some similar things as you. So that's really encouraging there. Love that story. Can I ask a flip side question to that conversational approach that you described with your data councils? Not structure, but how are these councils starting to measure success with these activities? Maybe we can compare notes on this.
Yeah, no, this is a fun one. I think this has continually been a challenge for me over a little while of doing this now is how do we measure? How do you, because a lot of people will ask the question, okay, it's about how many business terms I've declared. I've declared this many business terms. I've declared this many physical data elements, but I don't know that's always how I like to measure it because just doing that activity is not necessarily what I think is most valuable all the time. So, when it comes to metric type numbers, sometimes that's not the win. So, we've started to try to do things to start measuring, doing some maturity assessments. How have you done defining your domain? Do you have active stewardship? Have you been adherent to a set of standards? But I think there's plenty left to go on that journey. And it's a question I continually ask as well. And, Jay, I'd love your opinion on it too. How have you started thinking about that in your space? Because as you said, you're a user of it. So how do you start defining that in your space as well?
Yeah, so how we look, and we're a smaller company than you, right? So our governance efforts.
That's okay.
Yeah. So maybe for the audience, right? So you've got Moody's way up here, from a size and breadth standpoint. One of the things that we're doing is we're sort of applying those. I think you mentioned the word standards, right? And we're applying some of these standards in what we're calling certification levels. So if you've got reports, data sets, even KPIs, in order for, let's say, the users of an analytics data product, call it a dashboard or report, in order for them to see trust in it, they should have a level of confidence that the creators of it have achieved some standards. Right. So on the Calibra marketplace, there's something called the Trusted Business Reporting Solution that walks everybody through how to do this. But we're essentially certifying a data set. Have you met these criteria to be called certified bronze, certified silver, certified gold for a data set, a report, and otherwise? So what we're doing is we're beginning to measure what we're getting to let's say, achieve certification. And then we're measuring, let's say, certification levels across, out of all of our reports, how many are certified? Out of all of the data sets, how many are certified and at what level? And then we're making that visible to the users that are consuming those things. That's really kind of where we're starting from the ground up within the actual data itself.
Yeah.
So very cool. So there were some audience questions about value and measuring success and all of that. So hopefully that's been
It's
helpful.
a challenge, and it will continue to be a challenge. And I think there's, every business is a little bit different too. And Jay, I think you highlighted that really well just now, right? I think the most important things you tend to produce tend to be reports. Is that a fair assessment?
Sure.
Yeah. And so, for me, the most important thing for me is probably less so reports and maybe the data that's outgoing. Not that reports are important, but we're a data company. We're producing a lot of data. We got to be able to define what that is that's going out the door as well. So, while one piece of the company definitely focuses on reporting, there's also a big piece of the company that's just focusing on producing data. So certifying data sets and business reporting, you've got to kind of tailor that to each line of business. How you certify a report is going to look a little bit different than how you certify maybe a data set that's a piece of a product too.
Yeah, exactly. And there was an audience question about, let's say, valuing. So if you think about measuring value, so what you and I are discussing right now, Ryan, like I'd call those leading indicators of a successful data governance program. A lagging indicator would be, well, how much money did you make? How much money did you save? And if we become intentional about, let's say, measuring that efficiency gain that's generated by a data product, or actual return in income, if you, like Moody's, are selling a data product, it's important to be intentional about it. And don't just let that happen to you. Like have a plan. I think is the thing that we're starting to learn, and we're putting a lot of thought into internally here. And it's what you do for a living, so I think you're in good shape.
No, it's a fun concept too, because valuing data is going to be different for every business, right? Now, it may be, I don't know, easier or harder because we do sell data as a business, but in my mind, the first step of this is define what you've got. If you don't define what you've got, if you don't catalog it and understand it, understand how the data you have is being leveraged to create data products that are being sold, it's going to be impossible to value your data in an effective way, right? What's the value of this column sitting in a database? It's very challenging until you know what the use of that data is downstream and where it's coming from because of how much you paid for it. Or maybe you produce it internally. But I think having that lineage associated with that creates a really interesting way to start valuing it when you add on the usage with the lineage as well.
Yes, awesome. So Natalie asks a question, hearing lots of good things from this journey, imagining there were some big and some small hurdles along the way. So the question is, what was the most challenging part of this journey for you? And how did you overcome it?
Yeah, personally for me, I think it's meeting every line of business or domain where they're at, and trying to take a quick assessment of where they're at as well. And so luckily at Moody's, I don't feel like I've had any challenging stakeholders that are just like, no, I'm not going to do this or something like that. And, sometimes you experience that in businesses and sometimes you don't, but people here have been very receptive to it. But everyone's at a different point in their journey, and quickly diagnosing that and help them achieve their goals or getting to that next step is something that takes a little bit of time to figure out. And I'm very blessed on my team to have some people that have been around Moody's for quite a while. And so they can kind of help tease out where people are in their journey. So I think that's definitely the biggest challenge I see as we kind of got started, is definitely trying to meet people where they're at, make sure that one size does not fit all. So how do we help enable specific businesses and domains with their needs along the way?
Right. It sounds like your culture of collaboration is really helpful to overcoming that challenge, though. People seem to just want to help.
Yeah.
Has that been helpful to you? Is that
Most definitely. It is definitely a culture I was excited to be a part of. And you don't know until you get here, exactly what it's going to be like. But I had heard some some good feedback about the organization, and I got here and I felt the same way that you're describing it. Is a collaborative environment where people want to work together to solve these problems, and data governance is just another one of those problems that we need to solve for over time as well.
Right. So now talking about those domain owners and business stakeholders and folks that are participating in this, how do you help them to prioritize their multiple sort of use cases for data governance? Like, you can't do it all at once, probably, or they can't do it all at once, or a combination of both. So how does prioritization work?
Definitely, you can't boil the ocean, right? You gotta start in little pieces. And I think one of my peers who really helps with a policy and standards perspective, I give him a lot of credit for being a champion of this, is let's start with some basics. Make sure that we define things at the highest level possible, and then see how much deeper we need to go. What are your critical pieces of data that we need to have a much better perspective on? And really, I think through conversations, you start teasing that out, and you ask a lot of questions, back to people and say, hey, here's what I heard you say. Is that what you were saying? And you either be wrong or right, or they'll have some other feedback on it. But I think those kind of conversations help you lead them to water about where they need to prioritize. Because going back to the concept of democratization, I am not an expert in your line of business or your data. I can't tell you what the most important thing that you have is. So how do I, ask you enough questions where you realize what the really important parts of your data are that you need to focus on first? All of them need some level of control and documentation, but there are some that need the extra level because they're critically important to your business process. So how do I continue to ask you questions to make sure that you know which ones you want to focus on first? Because I can't decide that for you. That's kind of opposite of the democratization approach that we've been taking, right?
Is it always a conversation, or I'm adding on here. Is it always a conversation, or are you automating any of that through some sort of requirements?
No, we haven't found an opportunity to automate that yet. And that's not to say that there probably isn't a way to automate that, especially as you start thinking about the lineage approach as you get farther down the path. We don't tend to start with lineage. We start with defining what you've got. But I could definitely see opportunities if you started with a more lineage approach and could tell who was using it and how many times they were using a column. That'll give you some hard feedback right there about here's the one column you have in your database that's now being fed to 100 different users downstream. So, I could see how you could use some of those practices to kind of automate some of that.
Got it. All right. So I think you and I could probably talk about that one all day. That's a good one. But I'm gonna shift it a little bit with another audience question that's related from Sanjeev. So you talked about hundreds of people, right, being let's say impacted by or benefiting from even a single use case. You've got multiple lines of businesses or domains that you've described. Talked about prioritization. Now let's talk about what happens when you can't really easily identify a single accountable owner or domain, right, party that's going to own a term, let's say, or a data set. What happens when there's conflict's the wrong word, but what if terms are shared by the entire organization and no one wants to kind of take ownership of a shared business term?
Yeah.
How's that work?
It's fun. It's fun because, think of something, as simple as like a date, right? Or a date of birth or something like that. We don't capture so much personal data, at Moody's specifically. It's a lot more company oriented, but, there's always a use case where you call something one thing and I call it the other. Graduation date's a really interesting one for us. In context of HR, graduation date means something very different than graduation date of maybe a debt or a bond or something like that. And so I think the approach that we've taken to date is try to let domains define their own terms. And it's okay to have some duplication in things that are called like graduation date because they have a very different and distinct definition. But how do we over time start pushing people to have a difficult conversation about you are saying this and I'm saying this and we mean the same thing? And I think there's a lot of maturity that goes along with that. And that's something else that's not going to happen overnight. And, we do have scenarios where people are kind of referring to things slightly differently because that's what their business needs right now. And I think over time we have to keep approaching those opportunities and solving each one of those little cases. But that's a very long-term journey to make sure we get on the same page with every single business term for sure.
Right, right. Right. Yeah. So for share, I think this is a good case. What you're describing here is a really good case for partly what we would call a federated governance model,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where you have some enterprise-wide standardization that has to be sort of known across an enterprise,
Right.
while still maybe allowing for local context, right? Even with some of the same terminology or measures, right? So,
I think it's a great way to describe it. You've got to make sure that they have ownership over their own space. Now, there are some things that rise to the level of maybe enterprise needs to get involved, but typically
right.
these lines of businesses have specific definitions and have for years about what their data is.
Right, great. Okay, I'm going to ask one more audience question. We're nearly at time. This has been amazing. And thanks everyone for all of your questions. I hope we're getting to just about all of them. One more thing here. So this is from John. So where are you with the notion of self-service? So let's say comparing acting as a COE, you know, are you the owner or is the business the owner? How is that working out as far as, that self-service notion?
Yeah, I think this goes back a little bit to every line of business. You got to meet them where they are. And we've got users that are leveraging us just to kind of help with custom configuration on the back end. And then they completely are populating their environment. They're running it. They're making edits and changes, on a day-to-day basis. And that's wonderful. And that's where we want everybody to be at. And they're even coming up with new use cases of how they want to use it. And then leveraging us to help kind of enable it on an enterprise platform, right? That's where I want to get everyone to. But realistically, not everybody's there yet. Some people, you need to start with okay, here's how to use our data governance tools. Here's how to plug in. Here's the things you need to focus on. So I really do think that's self-serve is where we want to get them to for everything basically except for custom configuration. But some people aren't quite there yet. And we try to do some internal training, provide some documentation, user guides, but we're a lot more of interact with you and help you do it a few times, because I think that's the best way to learn is kind of doing it with you and helping understand how we can solve for it with you.
Love that. Yeah, I love that. And never assume that everybody just knows what you know.
That's totally right. Yeah.
I love how you're providing some training and guides and even consultation on these things. That's wonderful. All right. You know what's coming. I have one final question for you. It's a Jay question.
I've been listening to podcasts, so I know what's coming. Okay, I've been listening to my data download podcast.
Well, then you already answered it. So predict the future for us, just with the discipline of data governance. Where does that look like in the years to come?
Yeah, I think it's I like this much better when you talk to people about the AI experience and what the world's like in 5 or 10 years. This is so much harder from a data governance perspective because I don't know. 5 years ago, I would have said, did I think we were going to be able to automate lineage? I didn't think that was something that was going to be feasible in any kind of scale, but it's grown and matured quite a bit. But I think realistically, we're never going to get the full automation. And that's something I talk to my lines of businesses about a lot, is it's always going to take somebody to help kind of curate. Even something that might use AI, ML, somebody probably needs to look over that and confirm that the definition is right, or confirm that this business term does match this column. You can use a lot of great AI, ML, but I think it becomes suggestive at some point, but you still need people to govern and take ownership of that data and make sure that we're confirming over time that, yeah, this is what we should use it for and this is how it matches up. I think that's where we're going. But
so more automation, but not full automation. We still need the people.
Yeah, we still need some people. Yes.
Excellent. Ryan, you've been amazing. This was so informative. What a great chat. And audience, these were excellent questions. I think we got to just about all of them. Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it.